Hey guys, Justin here. I think there's a misconception with some newer people and people looking to get into iRacing, and specifically with NASCAR and the oval side of iRacing, about the level of equipment that you need to be competitive. So today I'll give my perspective on the levels of equipment and how they affect performance on the oval side of iRacing, starting with the basic starter level gear and what they can achieve and what their limitations are. And then we'll go over some common upgrades for sim rigs and what they provide and what you can expect from them. Now, disclaimer, I'm probably going to be a bit biased towards the validity of budget setups in iRacing because that's what I've been racing on my whole iRacing career, but I have run on some more expensive rigs before, including even for a Road to Pro race, so I think I know what the feelings are from those, at least on first glance, and I can kind of tell what you get from one versus the other. So the first setup I'm going to show is a really budget setup that even a kid could save up for with enough birthday money. In fact, that's exactly what I did back in middle school. I had a Driving Force GT, Logitech Driving Force GT. It was an open box, bought it off a Newegg, I think, for like maybe 75 bucks at the time. And it came with a broken force feedback, but I didn't know any better. I didn't really know what force feedback was. So I had that. And then my PC setup was probably about $400 total. It had like a 1050 in it or something graphics card. So it wasn't super powerful, but luckily iRacing can run on a lot of things, especially with low graphics. So using this setup, this picture was taken in March of 2020. And I believe at around this time I was maybe a 3700 in iRating. So that kind of was where I was at with just the really bare bones setup. And so what were the limitations of this setup? I would argue that the lack of force feedback was not as much of a limitation as you might think for the oval side of things. Because there was no force feedback in this wheel, I got very good at listening to my tires for cues on how to save tires and what my points were, and it also allowed me to be very precise with the steering. In fact, I know of a couple Coke Series drivers right now that don't use force feedback on their current wheels. Whether it be because they're used to NR 2003 having crappy force feedback, so they just carried it over from there, or they just know their cars well enough that they can be precise with their inputs without the force feedback being needed at all. The real limitation of this setup right here is going to be the pedals. These pedals were the biggest pieces of crap you'll ever see. There's no resistance in the brake or the gas, which is kind of interesting from a learning perspective because you learn to be super duper precise on the pedals, but when you switch to heavier pedals, even the Logitech G920 pedals, like not even expensive pedals, there's enough substance in those pedals, there's enough weight to where you feel like the pedals actually have a little bit of a feeling now, even if they're not force feedback pedals or so to speak. So yes, the equipment itself was limiting, but I was still able to overcome that to become a decent driver, make some top splits, and really contend for wins every once in a while with this setup. So I think that it's a very good starting point for anyone just jumping into sim racing and not wanting to commit too much to it. I think that this option, the budget option, especially for kids, is not one to be overlooked. Now let's take a look at the second iteration of my sim rig, which I reluctantly upgraded after the pedals of the Logitech Driving Force just completely died. So let's go meet Past Me. Welcome to my setup tour. We got only the finest equipment. This racing chair I got from a garage sale 15 years ago. And the trusty G29 on the keyboard tray and duct tape in case anything goes wrong. Then we got my pedals are staying here because that magazine holder thing is back there. And then we got the Bunny Girl Senpai for good luck, so I think we're good to go. So what are the limitations of this sim rig? Well, the wheelbase itself and the wheel, I really think that you can be competitive at all levels with, and I will uphold that. I mean, I'm still using it right now. But let's focus on the pedals again, because these Logitech pedals are more substantial than the first ones for sure, but they still have a very soft feeling and include that piece of rubber in it that makes the brake just feel all sorts of whack. I ended up taking it out and just creating a super soft brake pedal. So basically you have another pedal experience that's not very realistic, and it's also missing a key piece of information. I'll touch on that when I talk about my new setup, my most current setup. But before that, I do want to hit on a quick thing. The Logitech wheel is very small compared to a lot of the wheelbases for NASCAR, for Fanatec direct drive wheels, for instance. And because of this, you may be seeing in my guides, I put a lot of 16:1 recommendations in there, and that's because that almost offsets how small the wheel is to make the moves more precise and smooth. With a larger wheelbase, those movements of the wheel can be more smooth without really even thinking because of how wide the wheel is, and that'll make things like tire saving and smoothness of corner entry a lot more doable with the big wheels. But when I tried the big wheelbase and I tried the direct drive wheel, it was almost dead feeling to me. I couldn't really do anything with it. It was a crazy feeling. But I know that if you optimize that really big wheelbase, I think that that's where you can get the most precise inputs for tire saving. So that's another thing to note about the potential upgrade of a direct drive wheel to this Logitech wheel. But honestly, that really only happens at very high levels. The ideas of tire saving really mean more than that little extra bit that you would get. And another big difference between the two types of wheels is the sensitivity, or what the wheel can read. With the direct drive, really your entire range of motion is being read, but with the gear wheels, there's just a tiny, tiny dead zone in between each zone that Logitech can read from the wheel and send back to Iracing. So you'll just get that little bit more precision with the direct drive wheel, but honestly, you'll never even notice any sort of skipping with the Logitech wheel. So it really comes down to high levels that can notice these differences, and I still think that it's a very good start and maybe even a good continuation to be on the Logitech wheel. Now, I was speaking to my friend of the channel, Caden Anderson, about this topic a little bit ago, and he just upgraded from the Logitech to a direct drive, and he says that he feels that his skill ceiling is higher with his new setup, but also that he wouldn't recommend starting out with direct drive to anybody unless they foresee themselves just sinking their entire life into this game. But anyways, let's move on to my next and final setup. Alright, so this is my current battle station. We got single monitor setup. This is a 1440p 144 hertz monitor, so it's pretty pricey, but probably don't have the room for 3 monitors right now, so I'm going to stick with the single. That's what I'm used to. Same Logitech G920, and the pedals, the Fanatec V3s, those are my big upgrade. And my PC looks like crap, but it is kind of a monster. It's got a 3080 in it and other things that we built it with. And then I got my work area over here too. And this microphone right here, this is kind of the, it's like the cheapest USB mic I had on Amazon, I found on Amazon. You can probably hear that sometimes, but as long as I stay quiet enough, the mic is pretty good. And then my second monitor is just a cheap 1080p monitor that I use for just things on the other side besides iRacing. And then of course I have to showcase my Pokemon card collection and my Kyle Larson and a bit of Hendrick diecast collection too. So that's all kind of squashed together in there. So a bit of an upgrade from my last setup. Still, I would consider this fairly budget. Take out a couple things. I got the pedal upgrades, I got the nice computer, I got the nice single monitor, but still missing a lot of things that people consider to be necessary for a good sim rig. So with that current rig, besides looking all a little bit shinier and nicer, the big difference is those V3 pedals. And what was that little bit of extra information I was talking about earlier? Well, I was talking about the force feedback in the pedals. That's why you get the V3s, right? But what does that mean on ovals? Well, when you're feeling the force feedback in the pedals, you can get some feeling in those when you're losing your tires or losing your car a little bit before you hear the sound and feel the wheel. The difference in time is really not that substantial. It wouldn't help you too much, but it's enough to where you can utilize it as an extra tool. And I talked about it in my video about V3 pedals that I made when I got these a few months ago. To summarize the video, I think that you can optimize your use of them to increase your skill and increase the potential of your driving, but I don't think that the difference is as great as some people may lead you to believe. But I do fully believe that if you have the money for it, it's worth the upgrade if you're really into sim racing. Especially if you get into the road side of things. Really, those pedals were a game changer for me on the road side of things, being able to hit my braking zones and being able to put the right amount of brake pressure into things and kind of feel where the car was going. It was a lot better than just trying to pray and listen to tire squeals. But on oval, that's not really the application for them. And the last thing I want to touch on is immersion. I know a lot of people play iRacing for the immersion of it and not just the competitive aspect of it. And so this is when we get into upgrades that really help your immersion. These things could include a real sim rig where you sit back like in a race car, or something like a VR headset. Now I do think triple monitors have a place in your upgrade schedule because of helping on restarts, maybe helping with your spacing to the wall or other cars, knowing where things are around you at all times. But I've been running on single monitor for a while, and honestly I'm pretty comfortable on it and don't plan on changing it. But at the end of the day, immersion is really about enjoyment. So if you're willing to spend the money to increase the enjoyment of racing through these immersive upgrades, then I really think they are worth the price. I'm more of a gamer. I like the competitive aspect of iRacing. I've never raced a real car in my entire life, so what I have right now is what I've always known, and honestly, I'm perfectly happy with it. But if you're stuck in a rut in iRacing, if you're not having fun with it, if you're not being competitive, I urge you to not think that spending money on upgrades is the answer. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you all on the track.